And so, interestingly, I got asked to speak at our church back in Bancroft, the bridge. And guess what the assignment was? A parable. And then Terry says, we need some people to come and speak at our church. We're doing parables. Okay, well, I'm ready to go. So you guys get round one, Bancroft gets round two. Just a little, we got, okay. Now this is going to be a little tricky for me this morning because I'm clicking here for my own sake and I'm clicking there for your sake. Where do I click to? There? Oh, no. Yeah, it was on. Sorry. No, it was not on. Okay. There we go. Okay, so Lynn will hate me. Terry might hate me. Uta goes without saying. So this is just some pictures. Like, how come Tim and Uta have come to visit you at your church? And so Terry and Lynn and Uta and I, we go back probably about 8 years, I'm thinking. And we met at the Bridge Community Church in Bancroft. And we have been friends ever since. We happened to go through, we lived on the same lake together, which was kind of fun because we each had little 9.9 boats, and we would travel the lake in the evening just for a little lake stroll, and we'd end up stopping on each other's docks and saying hello and checking in on life. We went really deep during COVID because we broke the rules and said we will be a family unit. So we ended up getting together every week for prayer, in particular for our families and ourselves. And it was a really cool time where we just let down all the barriers and got deep with each other and saw some really cool stuff going on. One of the things that I think is interesting, so you guys have got like a bazillion kids here, which means God is doing something cool. We have some cool stuff going on at the Bridge Community Church in Bancroft as well. And it's interesting that through COVID, as couples, we prayed for revival in Bancroft. And it's Uta and I are getting to experience it, but it's based on what we saw happening back then. Okay, so, all right, this is going to be tricky for me. The title is The Generous Landowner, and it's the parable of the workers in the vineyard, and it's grace that shakes our worldly sense of fairness. Matthew chapter 20, verse 1. What I find interesting is today the format I've chosen is a storytelling format where I'm going to read stories and perspectives as I get you to listen and think about the different perspectives. But you need to remember that this story, this original story, it's not a story. It was Jesus himself talking to the people. And he told it in a story format because it would make sense. Okay, so this is entitled, Well, That Just Ain't Fair. And it helps me think about the story of the parable where the first worker was kind of thinking it's not fair. It's the same even in our own families if you think about it. So these are all the children, and I don't know how to operate the pointer, so I'll just look up here. This is us out in BC, and there are two couples, Uta and I, my youngest daughter, and our first grandchild, but we now have three. So it's not quite an accurate picture. But when I look at the picture, I kind of get this idea that the one who's the youngest gets the most. She's not quite paying the rent, so that means mom and dad are helping paying the rent. But we're keeping her out of the house. And then Eli and Casey, they have the first baby. Well, he got let go. He lived in Hamilton, and the steel plant closed in his division, and so he was out of a job. So he was jumping around from place to place, not getting enough income. So whenever Uta and I would go there to visit, Uta would prepare for a week meals to put in the freezer, and we would probably buy Chinese food out and order it in so they could have a nice takeout meal. And we'd have to pay gas driving down there, and in Ontario there's the 407, and so we call it the $500 weekend because we go to see the kids, and that's what it cost us. And then the other couple is my daughter and her husband Chris, and they live out in Squamish, BC, and they have pretty good jobs, and we can't go out and see them very often. Even just to go out, it's a plane ticket, so it's expensive for us to do that. So they don't get very much money. It just ain't fair. It's just how it kind of shakes out. And that's kind of how it's going to look today as we talk about this, that grace isn't fair. It isn't earned based on good behaviors. It's generous, it's free, and it's been given out of love. Okay, so this is the passage. So there's going to be quite a bit of reading this morning. So I want you just to listen to God's word, and I want you to put your mindset into the idea, the reality that this was Jesus speaking, and this is what he was saying. And I thought it was interesting, the song or your prayer, Dick, that you opened with, saying, thy kingdom come. And that's what we're going to talk about. What is God's kingdom like? So Jesus says, for the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard. He agreed to pay them a denarius. By the way, a denarius is a day's wage, probably about $250 in today's dollars, for the day, and sent them into his vineyard. About 9 in the morning, he went out and saw others standing in the marketplace, doing nothing. He told them, you also go and work in my vineyard, and I will pay you whatever's right, fair. So they went. He went out again about noon, about 3 in the afternoon, and did the same thing. About 5 in the afternoon, he went out and found still others standing around. He asked them, why have you been standing here all day doing nothing? Because no one's hired us, they answered. He said to them, you also go and work in my vineyard. When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to the foreman, call the workers and pay them their wages, beginning with the last ones hired and going to the first. Last to first. There's something about that. The workers who were hired about 5 in the afternoon came and each received a denarius. So when those came who were hired first, they expected to receive more, but each one of them also received a denarius. When they received it, they began to grumble against the landowner. Those who were hired last worked only 1 hour, they said, and you have made them equal to us. Who have borne the burden of the work and the heat of the day. But he answered one of them, I am not being unfair to you, friend. Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? Take your pay and go. I want to give the one who is hired last the same as the one that I gave you. Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? Or are you envious because I am so generous? So the last will be first, and the first will be last. A friend of mine in Bancroft and I lead a men's group, and actually it's a men's group that Terry and I started 2-3 years ago, and it's continuing on, and it's got kind of a second life to it now, and it's really thriving. And we have a WhatsApp group, and so I just sent the Matthew 20 to the guys and said, read it. What are your thoughts? And I got some responses back, so I want to share them with you. Grace looks like receiving kindness and favor you didn't earn, then extending that same unmerited love to others. It manifests as tangible goodness in everyday stuff. Unearned second chances given, patient listening, free forgiveness, and the quiet empowerment to overcome personal struggles. And there's no names, so it's all anonymous. Again, from the boys. Thanks for the ask, Tim. Not sure if you're looking for others to share, but it hits on something that I've been struggling with over the last while. The whole idea of greed versus gratitude, and also a sense of entitlement. Greed just keeps showing up everywhere, and with the first worker who was promised a fair day's wages, and that was delivered on, is that not enough to be content with? Having an expectation of more only comes from a comparison to others. But measured as a single identity, the transaction is complete, and there is no want or need for any exception. Maybe this is where the term one with God is framed around. I feel very blessed in my life, but then can't help seeing others like the last workers that put in less effort and have so much more. Personally, it says to me, being in a relationship with God, he will be there for you always. Just be content without exception. My 2 cents. What I find really cool about this is this guy, probably a year ago, we couldn't get him to come out to the group. He'd probably only come to church maybe once every 3 months. And I kind of even wondered if he knew Jesus. And now seeing his growth and seeing how he responds to us, just simply looking at something like this. This might be a little bit difficult because I I copied and pasted this one, so I actually have to read it from up here. This is the guy who also works the group with me, and he's actually speaking at the bridge today. But this is what he said. I think the entire story upsets what society and even the justice system teaches us about merit. Justice, fairness, equity, and equality. And it's not what upsets, it's whom. We are the workers, each of us bringing something different to the table. The owner is God, and the illustration is that he is true to his word, and he will treat each worker with generosity. But not generosity in the way we see it. Can you imagine what it would have to try to do to earn God's love? How ridiculous, difficult, impossible it would be to pay back what he offered to us in wages. If I was first, I would have felt entitled. If I was the last guy, I would have been filled with gratitude. This story could reveal inner tensions for longtime believers that might feel the world, the church, and others are owing something. I love this parable, Tim. For years, I've been deeply disliked the word deserve. The parable just flies in the face of works-based salvation. So I thought I would share those because having other people's input is always good. When I first read the parable, I have to say I might have fell into the category of the first worker. I serve, I do all the right stuff, I've had a lifetime of that. And then as you see, I'll go through some stories here. I more relate to the last worker, or maybe even the landowner, where I'm just so thankful when I see God at work and people coming to know him and people connecting with him in a deeper way just because I serve and do what I'm asked to do. All right, so this is something that happened to me. We were at an Easter service, and there's a pastor there. It's Martin Lord, if you guys, for those who know me, might know him. And in Bancroft, on Easter, we have all 4 churches in the community get together for an Easter service. It's really cool. It's really powerful. We all join at the Pentecostal church. This particular guy pastors at the Joy Bible Camp and the Graphite Bible Camp and is connected with the Graphite Bible Chapel. And he did this thing called a first-person narrative. Actually, he had a word for it, and I forgot to ever look it up and write it down. But it's a cool concept. So I'm going to read to you as if I am the first worker in the thought process of this isn't fair. I'm then going to read to you from the 11th hour worker. The guy, by the way, 11th hour means 5 o'clock. So they start at 6. So the 3rd hour is 9 a.m., okay, all the way at 11th hour. He literally got hired at 5 o'clock, was done work at 6, and got a full day's pay. And then the landowner, who represents God, and he's saying, this is who I am. So I want you, even though it's going to be a lot of reading, I want you just to get relaxed, sit back, maybe close your eyes, and I'm going to walk through these, and I'm going to pretend I'm these people, and listen to me as I tell you how the day's events went for me. All right, so this is the first worker. He's been there first thing in the morning. Before the first hint of daylight, I was already awake. My back ached from yesterday's work. My hands were still sore, but that didn't matter. My family needed food, and I needed to work. So, like so many others, I made my way to the marketplace. This morning, air was cool, and the first rays of sunlight were just beginning to turn the hills golden. All around me stood men, waiting, hoping, praying that someone would choose them for a day's labor. Then a landowner arrived. He looked over the crowd and called out, "Come work in my vineyard today. I'll pay you 1 denarius for the day's work." Denarius, a full day's wage. It was fair. It was honest. I didn't hesitate. We shook hands on the agreement, and I followed him to the vineyard. The work began immediately. Pruning vines, carrying heavy baskets, tying branches, whatever to be done, we did it. Before long, the morning cool disappeared, the sun climbed higher, and with it came relentless heat. Sweat poured into my eyes. My hands became raw. My shoulders burned under every load I carried. I kept going. I remember saying to the man beside me, "Just keep moving. It'll all be worth it at the end of the day when we get our full day's pay." Hour after hour passed. By noon, the heat was almost unbearable. My throat felt like sand. I rationed every sip of water. Every now and then, I'd notice the landowner returning from town with more workers. Some came mid-morning, others arrived around noon. More showed up later in the afternoon. I barely gave it a thought. More workers simply meant that the load would be lighter. Then, with only about an hour of daylight remaining, I saw him do it again. Another group. They had barely started working before the shadows began stretching across the vineyard. Meanwhile, every muscle in my body screamed, my clothes were soaked through, my head pounded from the sun, but I kept working. I earned every single coin of that denarius. Finally, the foreman called us together. Payday! He started with the workers who had arrived last. I stood back, exhausted but satisfied, waiting my turn. Then something happened that I never expected. The men who had worked only the final hour each received a full denarius, a full day's wage. I watched their faces light up in disbelief. They laughed. They embraced one another. Then came those hired earlier. Another denarius. Then another and another. Every group, the same pay. My heart started racing. If they're getting a full day's wage for 1 hour, I thought, surely those of us who have worked from sunrise will receive much more. Finally, it was our turn. The foreman placed a coin into my hand. 1 denarius. Exactly what we agreed upon, no more. I stared at it in disbelief. Every ache I'd ignored all day suddenly came rushing back. The heat, the sweat, the blisters, the hours, the frustration boiled over. This isn't right, I protested, stepping toward the landowner. Others joined in. We carried the weight of the entire day. We worked through the blazing heat. And these men who worked only 1 hour received the very same pay. That's not fair. The landowner looked at me calmly, not with anger, not with contempt, almost compassion. Friend, he said, I'm not being unfair to you. Didn't you agree to work for 1 denarius? Take what belongs to you. I choose to give the last workers the same as I gave you. Am I not allowed to do what I wish with what is mine? Then he asked the question that stopped me in my tracks. Or are you envious because I am generous? I had no answer. I closed my hand around the coin, turned, and began to walk home. The weight I carried wasn't the coin. It was something much heavier. I hadn't been cheated. I'd received exactly what we agreed upon. Every promise had been kept. Yet somehow, someone else's blessing stole my joy. As I walked beneath the cool evening sky, the coin softly jingled in my pouch. I couldn't stop thinking about the landowner's words. Maybe generosity doesn't always look fair. Maybe God's kingdom isn't built on keeping score. Maybe it's built on grace. Grace that cannot be earned. Grace that cannot be measured. Grace that is simply given. My hands understood the value of the hard work, but it would take much longer for my heart to understand the value of grace. Oh, that's the slide we're supposed to be looking at. And I just said that. Okay, sorry. I am doing this wrong. This is the one I want. Okay, the 11th hour worker. I don't deserve this. Oh boy, this is getting difficult on my slides. I'm sorry. That was right, what I just read, but let me just make sure. Sorry. Okay, I'm sure now. Okay, I am now the 11th hour worker. I don't deserve this. So again, pretend you're there, pretend you're him. By sunrise, I was already standing in the marketplace, waiting, watching, hoping. One by one, landowners arrived. Groups of men were chosen. Names were called. Friends walked away smiling. I stayed where I was, still waiting. The morning slipped away. The sun climbed higher. The crowd grew smaller. My hope grew weaker. By noon, I was still there. By mid-afternoon, still there. Every time someone approached, my heart raced. Maybe this time, maybe they'll choose me, but they never did. My stomach ached with hunger. My heart ached even more. I wasn't afraid of hard work. I wanted to work. I needed to work. At home, my wife was wondering if I'd found employment. My children, who would soon be asking if there would be food tonight. and with every passing hour, it became harder to imagine looking them in the eyes tonight. Still, I refused to leave. Maybe, just maybe, someone would need one more worker before the day was over. Then, as the shadow stretched across the marketplace, he came back, that same landowner. He looked at the few of us who remained and asked, why have you been standing here all day? We answered with words that were painfully simple, because no one has hired us. No one. Not because we're lazy, not because we're unwilling, simply because no one had chosen us. He looked at us and said, you also go into the vineyard. That's all I needed to hear. I didn't ask what I'd get paid. I didn't negotiate. Anything would be better than nothing. I ran. For one precious hour, I worked with everything I had. I carried baskets. I tied vines. I cleaned rows. I wanted him to know he didn't make a mistake by choosing me. Then the whistle sounded. The day was over. The foreman called us together. To my surprise, those of us hired last were called first. I stepped forward. Dust covered my clothes. Sweat covered my face. I held up my hand. The steward dropped a coin into my palm. A denarius. I froze. I looked down. I looked again. Surely this had been a mistake. A full day's wage for 1 hour? I looked at the others beside me. Each one held the same coin. Some stared in silence. Others laughed in disbelief. One man simply covered his face and wept. I couldn't stop smiling. That coin meant bread. It meant my children would eat. It meant I could walk through my front door with dignity tonight instead of shame. Behind me, I could hear voices growing louder. The men who had worked all day were beginning to complain. I understood why. If I had been in their place, perhaps I would have thought the same, but all I could think of was this. I wasn't being rewarded for 1 hour of work. I was being blessed by the generosity of the landowner. He could have paid me what I earned. Instead, he gave me what I needed. As I walked home beneath the evening sky, I held that coin tightly in my hand. It wasn't just silver. It was hope. It was provision, mercy. That day taught me something I'll never forget. Grace often arrives when you've stopped expecting it. It cannot be demanded. It cannot be earned. It can only be received. That night, I fell asleep exhausted, but I also fell asleep grateful. Because the landowner had not measured me by the length of my labor, my merit, he measured me by the greatness of his heart. And finally, the landowner, who is God in this story. I rose early that morning with the vineyard already heavy on my mind. The grapes were ripe, too ripe to wait, and the work was more than my own servants could carry. If we delayed, the harvest would be lost. So I went to the marketplace at dawn. Men were already there, waiting, watching, hoping. I called out, "You come work in my vineyard. I will give you a denarius for the day." And they came. No hesitation, no argument, just agreement. Fair wage for a full day's work. So I sent them out. By the third hour, the sun had climbed higher, and the work was still too great. I returned to the marketplace. More men stood there, idle, overlooked. "Why are you standing here all day?" "No one has hired us," they said. So I told them, "You go also to the vineyard. I will pay you what is right." And they went. At the 6th hour, I went again. The 9th hour, again. Each time, the same story. Men waiting, men willing, men unseen. And each time I said, "Go work, and I will give you what is right." Then came the 11th hour. The day was nearly gone. The light was fading. I found a small group still standing there, tired now, quiet, almost forgotten. "Why have you stood there idle all day?" And they said, "Because no one has hired us." So I said to them, "You also go into the vineyard. No bargaining this time, no questions asked, just a promise. I'll give you what is right." When evening came, I called the foreman, called the workers in, pay them their wages, begin with the last ones hired, and go back to the first. And I watched. 1 hour workers stepped forward first. They expected little, but I gave them a denarius, and their faces changed, shock and joy. The 9th hour workers came. I'm giving them a denarius. The 6th, here's a denarius. The 3rd, a denarius. One by one, the same measure, the same gift. But when the first came forward, the men who had labored since dawn, something shifted. They held their hands out, expecting more. But they received the same, a denarius. And the murmuring began before they even turned away. One step forward, voice sharp with exhaustion. These last men worked only 1 hour, and you have made them equal to us, who bore the burden of the day and the scorching heat. I looked at him, calm, and I said, friend, I'm not being unfair to you. Did you not agree with me for this denarius? Take what's yours and go. I chose to give to the last man the same as I give to you. Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me, or are you envious because I am good? He had no answer, only silence. One by one, they turned and went back into the fading light, some with joy still in their hands, some with questions burning in their minds. I remained there a moment longer, looking over the vineyard. The work was done. Every man fed, every household provided for. Some received exactly what they earned, others received far more than they could have earned in a lifetime of hours. And yet nothing was stolen, nothing was withheld, only given. Because the kingdom is not a ledger of labor and reward. It is the generosity of our Master who gives, not because of the hours counted, but because of the goodness within his own heart. Then I turned and walked home through the dusk, and the wages that day were remembered long after the coins were spent. Okay. I'm going to speed it up a little bit because that reading took a lot longer than I thought it would have. Just this point here is this: these are the other parables that are in the Bible, and where Jesus says something to the effect of the kingdom of God is like this. And they have similar connections. We just saw that the first will be last and the last will be first. Think of the prodigal son. And the first worker is kind of like the older brother who was disgruntled because he stayed. And the younger son who blew it all and came back and received all the party and the father's love and the ring and the robe, he's like the last worker in the day. And the point is all these parables that Jesus shared keeps trying to tell us something about the kingdom. And what he's trying to tell us is that it's backwards from how life works here on earth. And grace is the thing that rules. The point, it's about grace, not merit, mercy and abundance for all. Get living it, grace to others. And so that's where we're going with this. While I was reading the version from the 11th hour, I started to get a little teary because I know my slide deck and I know what I'm going to talk about next, and this might be hard. So I mentioned that our guys group was doing really well, and it's doing like remarkably well, not because of what we've done, but because the Holy Spirit has chosen to show up. And these three men each have a story. The guy on the far right, we have 3 Daves in our men's group, so I just call him Clark. He's not Dave. It's too difficult. Really cool story. This guy, truck driver, he tells me he drank 2 large bottles of whiskey every weekend and a 24-pack of beer. He was military trained, so he knew how to fight really well. And he got in a fight every single week of his life. His name was Pitbull. And you look at him now, and I saw a picture of him back when he had his military body, and at first I didn't believe him, and then I realized he's had this life. But he's gone through a ton of stuff that's really messed him up with trauma and things that have gone wrong in his life. And he came to the bridge. Apparently he came 8 times and sat in the parking lot before he finally came into the church. He found people friendly and started to connect with men. He started to connect with the pastor at first, a guy by the name of Steve. And long journey. He's been in this guys group for 2 years. He became a Christian. He got baptized. But he still struggled with night terrors. And literally in our men's group, we actually had a few sessions. One, we all put hands on him and prayed over him, asking that God would take that away and heal that. And another one where we all just spoke into him, what we saw in him, because he didn't see it in himself. Anyways, he's come a long way, and he's connected to these other two guys coming to know the Lord as well, which is kind of the cool part of the story. So the next guy is in the middle, and his nickname is Shaggy Joe. He didn't know that for about a year until finally he found out we were all calling him Shaggy Joe. And he's kind of just lived his own life the way he wants, drank too much, smoked too much, still can't stop swearing, but he's become a Christian, and he just got baptized this past Sunday. Very cool. And Clark was very instrumental in connecting with him in his journey, and so it was seeing this. And so I'm presenting these guys as 11th hour vineyard workers. They did their life the way they wanted to, and then at some point they hit the wall and God's grace kicked in. And I believe that's the kind of stuff we need to be looking for. That's the church you need to be. That's the person I need to be, looking out to how I'm going to show God's grace. Anyways, Clark gave him a cross and gave him a Bible and put some words in the front, and it's really cool to see this Shaggy Joe. He's just full of life and full of joy, and God's working in his life. And now, like literally every Sunday he comes to church, he brings some family member. So it's kind of just it's the multiplying effect that seems to be going further. And the guy in the far left, his name is Mike, and he's a colleague that I used to work with. And so Terry and Lynn know some of the story because we were probably praying for him back during COVID. He ran into some mental health issues. He crashed. He blew up his marriage. He lost his job. He was imprisoned, and so he kind of just fell apart mentally. He called me up recently, and he said, Tim, promise me you're not going to proselytize me. I said, Michael, of course I'm going to proselytize you. Why would I be standing at the edge of a cliff watching you go over and not tell you, stop, you need to change your path? So anyways, I agreed to go down and meet with him. He was, I forget where we went to meet. Anyways, it was near Oakville-ish area. And the cool part was that this was a Saturday night, and so I texted my men's group and said, hey, I'm going to go see this guy tomorrow, pray for me. And sure enough, on Sunday morning, Clark here says, I wish I could go with you. That would be good. I'd love to share my faith with this guy. Sounds like this guy would really get a benefit from my life story. And I said, well, let me text him and see if he minds. So I texted Michael and said, do you mind if I bring Clark? And by the way, the night before I had a talk with Michael, and I told him about Whiskey Clark, the guy who drank too much and got into fights. And he said, I'd love to meet Whiskey Clark. And so I brought him down, and we had lunch with him. And during the lunch, he started off really poorly, but by the end of the lunch, he was getting talkative. And finally, he was talking about all these things in his life. And I said to him, you've got these kind of demons in your life, these real big problems. We can pray over you to help release those. But you have to do something else, because if you take the demonic component out of the equation, you leave yourself wide open, and you need to bring in the spirit part. And we've talked about what that is before. And he said, I'm at the point where I'm done with Michael. I'm ready to do this. And so we went outside, and we prayed that anything that was going on demonically in his life would be gone in the power of Jesus' name. And then we invited him to invite Jesus in. And he did this really, he has a PhD in philosophy. He did this really dancey thing where he said, I believe, God, you are God, and you do good things. And so he did this whole prayer, and then we just looked at him, and Dave Clark goes, no, that's not the way it works, Michael. You got to submit, you got to give in. You got to ask, you got to say, you're Lord, and I need you in my life, and I want you to come and be my Lord. And so he just stood there, and he fought it for a minute. And then finally he just prayed that prayer. I don't know what's happened to Michael. I don't know if he checked himself into a mental health ward. I don't know if he's dead. I have not heard from him since. But I'm excited to know he knows Jesus. I'll see him. This was last Sunday. Sorry about this. I don't get emotional often until I'm in front of an audience. These are all these guys getting baptized. And there's one more story in here. Jasmine, her ex-husband is a bike gang leader, and she's hung out with, I'll say the name Jen, because you guys know Jen, and she wanted to say her life was changed, and these people all got baptized. So these are 11th hour grace receivers. So what can you and I do in our daily journey here, bringing God's kingdom here on earth? How are we going to facilitate that? Living it every day. Say no to envy. Say yes to gratitude. That takes a practice. You kind of got to sit down and take some time to do that. Welcome everyone, extend grace freely, and stop being grumpy. The last will be first. Do you know the King? Stop being a grumbler. Be thankful. Choose joy. Maybe you're here today and you don't know the King. What are you going to do about that? So, for anyone here who doesn't know the King, we would love for you to know the King. Michael, Clark, Shaggy Joe, in the last 2 years, they just met the King for the first time, and their lives have been transformed from the inside out. So, I would invite you to, if you're thinking about that, if you're wondering if that's something that needs to happen in your life, I invite you to act on that. You can come see Terry or Lynn, Dick, anyone on the worship team, myself. We'd love for you to come to know Jesus as your Savior and have the awesome payment of a day's wages in your 11th hour, which is eternity in heaven. This little stint on earth is nothing. There's eternity coming. Are you ready? I pray that you'll choose Jesus. Call up the worship team.